Good evening, all of you. Um, Good evening, all of you. Thank you all for thank you all so much for investing your time with us on a Sunday evening. First, I would like to warmly welcome you to the Innovation Nation Sri Lanka Volunteer Training Program. It's nice to have you all here. So now, I would like to warmly welcome our speakers for the evening. Mr. Sachindra Samararatne, Ecosystem Builder, Industry Development, Startup and Innovation. Mr. Aloka Gunasekara, Director, Startup and Business Ecosystem Innovation, YouLead. Ms. Minuri Adasooriya, Head of Programs, Hatchworks. It's an honor for us to have all of you as an amazing panel, and thank you all for accepting our invitation, supporting us, and being here with us today amidst your busy schedules. And also, I would like to welcome all the young professionals Sri Lanka representatives. It's such a pleasure to have you here today with our volunteer training session. And finally, I would like to welcome all the Innovation Nation Sri Lanka organizing committee members, INSL provincial coordinators and university representatives, and also the regional program subcommittee members who have joined with us at this session. Hope you all would gain the best out of this session. Without further ado, I would like to invite Mr. Sachindra Samararatne to acknowledge us about the startup ecosystem in Sri Lanka. Thank you. Over to you, Mr. Sachindra.
Thank you. Thank you once again for having me here, represent the ICTA agency of Sri Lanka. So the ICTA agency of Sri Lanka has the mandate of the digital transformation of the country. And as part of our digital economy pillar, we have a main role of supporting especially the tech startup ecosystem of this country. And we have been doing that since 2010. And we try to take a hands-on approach where we are involved with what's going on the ground, but also looking at the development of policy wherever which is required and supporting that, and also supporting the ecosystem enablers. So I'm really happy that this audience today, I've been told, are ecosystem enablers, or in other terms, ecosystem builders. And that's, guys, it's a great thing to be. And recently I visited the Global Entrepreneurship Congress, which was held in Riyadh, and they actually represented or presented this title, Ecosystem Builder, as a profession. And the Global Entrepreneurship Congress is participated by more than 140 countries. It's like the, we call it the, it's like the UN. It's like the UN for entrepreneurship. And the title Ecosystem Builder is actually a profession in all these countries, which are part of the Global Entrepreneurship Network. And so I'm happy to be addressing an audience of ecosystem builders today. Thank you for coming forward as IEEE members to support your district, to support your province, to support universities, because we need more like you. So you and I are the same. We are all ecosystem builders. I don't run my own startup, but I support, as part of my government role for the past 12 years, building this ecosystem to support other startups, to support other entrepreneurs, to support other aspiring entrepreneurs to really achieve their dream. So within these 20 minutes, what I plan to share with you is some information about the ecosystem you and I are building, what it's like, where is it going, and what kind of support infrastructure which is there. And I will be happy to answer any questions, because as an ecosystem builder, it's important that we know what's going on in our ecosystem. That's called ecosystem thinking. We cannot work in a silo. අර අපේ district එකේ අපේ university එකේ අපේ දේ විතරක් කරගෙන අපිට නිකන් ඉන්න බෑ. අපි දැනගන්න ඕනේ ලංකාවේ මොනවද වෙන්නේ. ලංකාවේ අනිත් district වල මොනවද වෙන්නේ? ලංකාවේ අනිත් universities වල මොනවද වෙන්නේ? මේ ecosystem එකේ මොකද්ද වෙන්නේ? ඉතින් ඔය වචනේ ecosystem කිව්ව ගමන් that we have to think beyond what we call siloed thinking. So that's what I plan to do during the next few minutes. Let's see how it goes. Right. So this ecosystem that you and I are supporting and living in has been, I would say, the word startup, not entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship has been there in this country for ages, right? Entrepreneurs have been there for a long time. But this word startup really intertwined with a lot of technology enabled or technology startups. That's how this came to be. Became a mainstream word. අර අපි වචනයක් හැටියට නිකන් පොඩ්ඩක් කියවන්න පටන් ගත්තේ since about 2010-2009. And ICTA had the privilege of being involved in this trending process since that time with our program called Spiralation. සමහර අය Spiralation ගැන අහලත් ඇති. And maybe you know people who have been part of Spiralation. There are more than 110 startups which have been supported, and some big names like Basha, Danika, and SenseMate, Miller and the team, and MintPay are some names that are popular, which are entrepreneurs who have been supported by Spiralation. So, so from that time onwards, with ICTA also being involved, we also saw a lot of other organizations really taking up this responsibility of building the ecosystem. One such organization is 𝐲𝐨 IT Hub, which is a provincial based. They are based in the northern province, and they took ownership of the northern province to build it. And since 2011 or 10, since now, they have been doing that with the 𝗲𝐿 Geek Challenge and doing many other programs. So that's an example of a unit or a provincial based or a regional based entrepreneurship drive that has taken place, and a very successful one. So from that point onwards to now, you see the past 5-6 years, there has been so many other programs, not only local organizations, but also international organizations, which have come and worked in Sri Lanka. The Startup Weekend, සමහර අය ඔයගොල්ලෝ අහලා ඇති Startup Weekend කියන එක, it's actually a brand. It's owned by Techstars. That's a US-based company. And this brand came to Sri Lanka, and the first Startup Weekend was done in Jaffna. And since that point onwards, I think we all have been part of Startup Weekend. And in Aloka ran a Startup Weekend, 1 or 2 or 3. I especially remember the one in Kandy. So we have at least run more than 20 Startup Weekends in the country. This is all volunteer based, just like what you guys are doing. This ecosystem has been built on the blood and sweat of volunteers. It's all volunteer time. It's people who have gone beyond their scope, who has those have been really booking supporting the startup ecosystem, has built this. All credit goes to them. All this entire community who has supported and paid it forward. So just like Techstars, we have Seed Stars, we have the entrepreneur organization. Such organizations also started their events here. And in 2017, ICTA took a lead in becoming a member of the Startup Genome Network. So Startup Genome publishes a report called the Global Startup Ecosystem Report. And this benchmarks and this represents all the startup, we call the startup ecosystems in the world. So Sri Lanka is also mentioned there. Sri Lanka is also represented there. And we have been part of this member network. And therefore, we have a lot of data on how a startup ecosystem is growing. So one important thing for an ecosystem builder is that you know the data. Where are we as a startup ecosystem compared to other ecosystems, especially similar ecosystems like Sri Lanka? It's maybe similar in size. These similar in size ecosystems could be in Europe, could be in Southeast Asia, could be in not in South Asia. South Asian ecosystems are large, but maybe Nepal, maybe a similar sized ecosystem. So we are even though we are a country with larger population, our startup ecosystem is quite small. We don't yet have even 1,000 startups in the country. When I say startup, I mentioned a lot of tech startups because that's the data that we have. So we need to know this data, which I will show to you. And hopefully I will also share this slide. So you will also know when you go and do programs in these districts, in these universities. We also have done reports with local agencies like PwC, it's an international organization, but with the local arm to understand, that was done in 2020, what are the challenges that the startups go through and what are the government agencies that needs to reinvent their processes to help these startups. And we also looked at how can we support startups in providing them with loans or a credit scoring system which will help banks to give them loans. So overall, what you need to know from this slide is that a lot of work has gone in, not only with ICTA, but a lot with all other organizations in the country to support this ecosystem. And this is and there are so many avenues of support in the country right now, opposed to or compared to what was there in 2010 to 2015. So many different types of support structures. Whether you're a very early stage entrepreneur, with then idea එකක් තියෙන idea එක MVP එක minimum viable product එක නැත්නම් පළවෙනි prototype එකක් දක්වා ගෙනියන්න ඉන්න අයට උනත් support කරන්න ගොඩක් programs තියෙනවා. And also those who have a prototype who wants to maybe get seed funding or angel funding, there are programs. So there are different types of programs in the country which you need to know about because you are guiding them. ඕගොල්ලෝ දන්නේ නැත්නම් කොහොමද ඒගොල්ලෝ දන්නේ නැහැ. ඕගොල්ලෝ හරහා තමයි මේ information ටික ඒගොල්ලන්ට යන්නේ. So it's very important that you know about the programs, that you know about the global startup ecosystem report and the data in that. It's really important that you know the organizations and what the organizations do. So from ICTA standpoint, since 2021, ICTA has a special pillar, a separate unit focusing on the digital economy. And as you see, the second one is a special unit focusing on startup ecosystem development. So we never had a dedicated unit all this time. And since 2021, we have a dedicated unit with 4 people working there, headed by 𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗏 ප්‍රේමරත්, which you might already know about, have heard about, who's heading that unit. So what we are trying to go towards or build towards is a startup nation. And this is a term coined by Israel and a book that came out, where a nation which is thriving or wants to thrive and develop its socio-economic background with startups. So similarly, in Sri Lanka also is looking to becoming a startup nation, and where we have globally recognized tech startups and founders, that we are connected locally and globally, and an education system which supports entrepreneurship, whether it's school or whether it's universities, and laws and policies which supports entrepreneurship. And finally, we are inclusive, that all districts, all provinces are given the opportunity to be part of this entire drive or jump on board the bandwagon, as we are saying, where we are able to create startups which are impacting positively to our country. So I just have to be mindful of time. Wait a second. Okay, I think I went about 5 minutes. So this is one of the earlier ecosystem, global startup ecosystem reports that Sri Lanka got featured in. We saw a 4x growth at that time. And today, from $32 million in about 2017 to $32 million of ecosystem value. It's a special economic term that we use in the startup ecosystem to value an ecosystem, which is called the ecosystem value. From $32 million, now we are $228 million in 2021. So that's a good progress. I'm sure we can run faster, we can do much more, but it's something to be happy about. That this ecosystem, even after being hit by so many challenges during the past few years, that we are still growing as a ecosystem. Last year, it was $132 million. This year, it's $228 million, which means that our ecosystem is growing, that startups here are getting funded, and it's progress. So in a nutshell, it's progress. This is a very important website that you should keep note about is startup.sl.lk. This is a volunteer initiative we started in 2019 with the then ministry also involved, but a huge volunteer approach. And in 2020, ICTA took up the operational aspect of it and still operating it. Right now, we're happy to say with 700 plus startups, tech startups registered in this platform. Startups which are doing both software products and software services to all things digital, including many areas of technology, including technology areas like IoT, AI, data science, etc., to business verticals like finance, retail, manufacturing, banking. So we have all that in startup.sl.lk. So that's a good website for you to go and check out for you to understand the startup domain in the country. This is a very important slide because startups are not only in the Western province. They're about the first 5 years of startup ecosystem development, it was very focused on the Western province. But now we have more than 1/3 of our startups which are born outside the Western province. 1/3 of our startups, if you say 700 startups, it's more than almost 175 startups are outside the Western province, which is a great thing. And that is because of startup hubs like 𝗬𝗏 Startup Hub, like the 𝐲𝐻𝐸 which I mentioned, and also the newly created startup hubs which are also supporting them. There are startup hubs which have been created in almost all the provinces except North Central. Every other province has a startup hub. So if you're belonging to any other province, you will have your own startup hub, and do get connected to it. IEEE knows all the startup hubs and the people. These are some of the domains that Sri Lankan startups working. And this is a very old slide, just done in 2019 or 18, but this kind of shows the network. It's very important that you're part of this network, that you're a node in this network, supporting everyone else, getting support and also supporting, providing information and getting information, providing services and getting services. So it's very important. It's a transactional approach that we see. Guys, organizers, can you give me a heads up about 5 minutes when I need to finish? Thanks. So it's also important as an ecosystem that we are connected globally. We can't just be in a silo saying we are Sri Lanka and we are Sri Lankan startup ecosystem. It's not like that. We are part of a global ecosystem. We are also part of a regional ecosystem. If you take Asia, so we need to be connected to these players. There's a lot of benefit that we can get, especially when it comes to market access. So we are not building startups only to support Sri Lanka. Some might be only to support Sri Lanka. That's fine, but it's the solution to a problem that they are building could be applicable across a lot of countries. So might as well take that product out of the country and bring in dollars to the country, which is very, very important right now. So I believe that startups that are our answer to our economic development. And one big news that we received recently is that the IT industry in our country is now the second largest export revenue earner. Second largest export revenue earner in this country. We were fourth and now we are second, based on the data that EDB had said. So they might do a bit of a publication on that. That's a big thing because we are one of the industries that we have been very successful. So the room and potential for technology startups is amazing. So this is global connectedness, and these are some of the challenges that startup face. So it's important that you also read this report. This report is called the Startup Friendly Government Report. It's on ICTA's website, and you can go through it. You can understand the startup ecosystem. When you're a startup ecosystem volunteer, an ecosystem builder, it's really important that you, as I said, know the domain. And you will find a lot of information to understand what challenges that startups go through at each stage of their life cycle. So every entrepreneur goes through a particular life cycle. And in every stage, they need certain different types of support. And you need to know that. You might be working a lot with the more what we call ideation stage, when the people start with an idea. The idea එක පටන් ගත්ත ගමන් ඒගොල්ලන්ට ඕන support එක වෙන්න පුළුවන් ඒගොල්ලෝ දෙන්නේ. But it's important that as an organization as IEEE that we are able to support them through their journey. So that's important. With Startup Genome, we also have, as I said, done a very deep, very thorough analysis of our country, benchmarking Sri Lanka with other countries. I know 𝗓𝗚𝗂 has seen this presentation and is well aware of this data. All the startup hubs are well aware of this data because we have presented to them as well. There is a huge potential in Sri Lanka, especially in the universities. If we are able to build the mindset of building entrepreneurs in the universities, we have a huge potential. We can grow our startup base by 15x, 15 times. And that's very important, only with the university base that we have, because we are kind of in the activation phase. So this is some slides from the genome assessment. Activation phase. We have a huge path to go to. We are in the very inception phase. We have to go to globalization, and to do that, we have to pass 1,000 startups. That's one of the measurements. And currently, we are still about 700, and also there are 700. We have services startups as well. So these are some of the data that comes out of that report. As a country, as a population, our startup density is very, very small. We really have to grow our number of startups. We have the potential to grow. We can grow very fast, and growing is from what we call homegrown startups. අර මෙහෙන් හැදෙන්න ඕනේ. අපි පිටරටින් කට්ටියව ගෙනල්ලා දැන් අපි හිතනවා සිලිකන් වැලි වගේ ලොකු ඩෙස්ටිනේෂන්ස් වල මේ ගොඩක්ම ඉන්නේ පිට වෙන රටවල් වලින් ආපු අය කියලා. එහෙම දෙයක් නෙවෙයි. සිලිකන් වැලි වල උනත් ඉන්නේ සිලිකන් US මාකට් එකෙන්ම හැදුන startups. So we call them homegrown startups. Very important to build startups from our country in itself. And very important that there is both female-led and male-led startups. Right now in Sri Lanka, we have very, very small number of female-led startups. It's only 6%. And we are less than the global average, as you see in the screen. So this is important when you work with founders, especially if they are female founders. There are many other programs which are dedicated to female founders. I think Minuri can talk a bit more on that, because Hatch does a lot of programs on that, and they recently launched a fund as well, and many other programs. So it's important that we are able to understand this data, and this is a particular slide on what we call local connectedness. දැන් අපි හිතනවා අපි මේ ලංකාවේ වුණාම අපි හැම කෙනාම දන්න නිසා මේ locally අපි අපේ connectedness හොඳයි කියලා නෑ. එහෙම නෙවෙයි මේ connectedness කියන නිර්ණායකය or the index, it's not formed like that. Local connectedness means, can an entrepreneur get connected to an investor or an expert very fast? එක call එකකින් පුළුවන් ද expert කෙනෙක්ට call කරලා එයාගේ තියෙන ප්‍රශ්න ඉස්ත ගන්න. එහෙම තත්ත්වයක් ලංකාවේ නැහැ. එහෙම තත්ත්වයක් ලංකාවේ නැහැ. So that's the type of connectedness that we are looking at. So as an ecosystem, we'll be focusing our growth, our development and funding within 3 lenses. මේ startups වැඩි කරන්න ඕනේ, startup වල quality එක වැඩි කරන්න ඕනේ, and we have to support early stage funding. අර ඕගොල්ලෝ ගොඩක්ම වැඩ කරන්න යන කට්ටිය will need this early stage funding. So ICTA gives a grant. තව අය ඉන්න පුළුවන් angel fund එකක් දෙන්න. So this is called seed level funding, early stage funding. So that's very important. And this is what we call the startup funnel. So in Sri Lanka, what we want to have is 1,000 startups by 2024, and 700 of those 1,000 startups earning revenue, and 200 of those startups is put into a category of scale-ups, which means that they earn more than $1 million of revenue per year. So how do we take them through this, what we call this funnel? ඉතින් කොහෙන් හරි තැනකින් පටන් ගන්න එපා. මේ දකුණේ දැන් වමට තමයි මේ කියන්නේ. And all the different types of support required is at the bottom. අර යට slide එක තියෙනවා. මම මේක share කරන්න. So this is kind of an overview for you guys. I hope haven't gone beyond time a lot, to show you and get you interested that this ecosystem, මේ අපි නිකන් මේ උදේ ඇහැරලා දේවල් කරලා හිතනව නෙවෙයි. It's well planned. There is studies done. There is data. So I like to call it a data-driven approach. So our ecosystem building is data-driven. It's systematic. It's planned. And අර මේ අපේ ඔහේ යන ගමනක් නෙවෙයි මේක. අපි ඔක්කොම එකතු වෙලා කරන ගොඩාක් programs තියෙනවා, and especially 10,000 ideas, which all of the entire network is part of. Right. Okay, 5 minutes more. I still have 5 minutes more. Okay, great. So which the entire network is part of. I was asked to speak a bit about 10,000 ideas as well, and that's something you guys will be involved as well in your districts, because 10,000 ideas is a goal. So we believe that we need about 10,000 ideas in the country generated and supported to get into that 1,000 startups. So we work with a lot of partners. Basically, we can't do this alone. We have never done anything alone. We've always done with partners, and IEEE is also part of that. Innovation Nation program is also something that we are national partner of as ICTA. So when we develop and generate these 10,000 ideas in the country, we also have a grant program which we give to what we call enablers, so that they can run programs. And with these 10,000 ideas, these people are the students, or the not only students, the people who generate these ideas are connected to various programs. And with that, we try to support these 10,000 ideas to be nurtured so that one day they can become a startup. And I would say it's a campaign. It's a joint initiative across all of us. And what we try to achieve is try to support them through different phases. As I said, I'm happy to say that even at idea level, there are many programs now which could support them through mentoring, which is something we didn't have earlier. So you can always give that support, that encouragement to students, to these aspiring entrepreneurs. Even when they're in university, the universities now are trying to build an entrepreneur ecosystem. And that's something we are also engaging with multiple universities, so that they have their own incubators, they have the incubation space, they have the mentoring support, so that universities itself will take entrepreneurship or building entrepreneurs as one of the main successes. අර මෙච්චර කාලේ යුනිවර්සිටි එකකින් අපි හැමතිස්සෙම බලන්නේ කවුද ෆස්ට් ක්ලාස් ගන්න අය බිහි කරන එක, නැත්නම් මාස්ටර්ස් ලෙවල් එකේ කට්ටිය නම් නැත්නම් කොච්චර රිසර්ච් කරනවද, දැන් ඒ වගේ ඒවට ඇරෙන්න කොච්චර ස්ටාර්ට්අප්ස් යුනිවර්සිටි එකෙන් හැදුවද කියන එක යුනිවර්සිටි එකේ VC ගේ ලෙවල් එකේ ඉඳන් ප්‍රධාන නිර්ණායකයක් වෙන as a main criteria, as a main indicator that they can even kind of compare universities. So හොඳම යුනිවර්සිටි එක, හොඳටම කරපු යුනිවර්සිටි එක වෙන්නේ හොඳටම ස්ටාර්ට්අප්ස් හදපු යුනිවර්සිටි එක කියන දේ බවට පත් කරන්න තමයි අපේ තියෙන උවමනා. So we need you to build that hype, because you are ambassadors. ඕගොල්ලෝ තමයි මේ වචනේ මිනිස්සුන්ට අරන් යන්නේ. ඕගොල්ලෝ තමයි ගිලේගොල්ලෝ මොටිවේට් කරන්නේ, ඉන්ස්පයර් කරන්නේ. ආලෝක තව ගොඩක් දුරට ඒක ගැන කතා කරේ කොහොමද මේගොල්ලෝ ඉන්ස්පයර් කරන්නේ කියලා. So you guys are doing a big thing. It's really important for the country, especially now. And I wish you all the best. And if any help is required from ICTA, we are here to. I have a big team there. I'm not saying big team, but a dedicated team there who would definitely help you. So thank you once again, IEEE, for organizing this and getting this geared up in the country. Very excited to see what we can do as ecosystem. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sachindra. That was a very insightful speech regarding the startup ecosystem in Sri Lanka, with a valuable amount of analyzed data actually, which will be useful for all our volunteers. And now I would like to invite Mr. Sachindra to accept our token of appreciation for supporting us and being with us here today.
Thank you, guys. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mr. Sachindra. Next, I would like to invite Ms. Minuri Adasooriya to enlighten our INSL volunteers regarding a very important topic, leadership communication. Over to you, Ms. Minuri Adasooriya. Ms. Minuri.
Sorry, I kept dropping out, everyone. I'm just living off a Wi-Fi connection. I hope you can hear me. I'm not going to switch my camera on
Yes, we
in
can
case there are any drop-offs or anything like that, but I'll get straight into my session. There may be connection issues, but we'll see how we go. Team, if you can let me know if I keep dropping in and out, that would be great. I'm happy to share this deck with you and give you a separate recorded session if this doesn't work out well. So today is all about leadership communication, and this is really important as volunteers. And first of all, I have to acknowledge all of you on the call today. I know it's not an easy time to be studying, working, and trying to get by in Sri Lanka, but your dedication as volunteers is amazing. Like Sachindra said, our startup ecosystem is very much reliant on amazing volunteers like yourself. And a lot of us volunteer our time for events as well. So it's a beautiful reciprocal relationship that we all have, and I encourage you to make the best of it. And for my session here today, it's more about sharing what my personal lessons have been, having had leadership portfolios myself, having been a student like yourself as a volunteer. Those are just some of the things I'd like to share today, and I'll make it a quick one because I know we all are challenged with the resources we have available. So the first thing I really want you to ask is checking your biases. So what a bias is, are these preconceived notions that we have in ourselves. We've grown up with these, we've evolved as humans as these biases, right? We look for people who look like us, sound like us, dress like us. We look for tribes to build, right? But what these biases does, it stops you from building a diverse team under you, or you stop accepting diverse views from your team because you're so focused. And there are hundreds of biases out there, right? To the point there are biases that you may favor someone's opinion over another because you find them attractive, for example, right, over the other. And I've done this when I'm at university, and that's what I'm telling you. So don't let these different biases get to you. So always put integrity and fairness first, right? In terms of, we're always saying like, our university, our school, they did this during that project at that time, they're useless. Don't think like that. Always assess the talent and the team that you have in front of them for what they bring to the table at that moment in time, right? So always work with integrity and fairness. So this means not giving favorations to people that you, within inverted commas, like or have worked before, because what you may be doing is there may be a team from a very rural part of the country who may not speak English well, but they've got a brilliant idea, right? And just because they don't speak English well, or they haven't gotten the best slides or the right tools, you may think you may not want to support them, right? And again, this is not your fault. These are the biases, again, that have been built into you. And always be objective over being emotional, because you're going to be in situations during INSL where people are asking you 100 million questions, sometimes the same question again and again. And I'll teach you how to deal with that very easily. And you may get angry, you may get frustrated, right? You may want to rip somebody's head off because they're not understanding what you are trying to say. But don't let that get the best of you, because in Sri Lanka, especially, making a point means that you yell in front of others to a person to make yourself heard, to bring a point across. But what are you doing to that person? Put yourself in that person's shoes, and I'll come to empathy in a minute. How would you feel if somebody yelled at you in front of others, or called you names or things like that, when all you're trying to do is understand a situation, right? So take the emotion out before you react to something, before you get asked, before you give an answer. Always think objective and kind of go, okay, is this a valid question that they're asking? Are they frustrated? Are they hurt? Are they confused? Okay, I understand. Let me come and help you. So like I said, empathy is very, very important. Always walk. So sympathy and empathy are two very different things. Us in Sri Lanka are very good at sympathy. Anepau, right? That's sympathy. Empathy is very different. Empathy is your ability to walk in someone's shoes, right? It's a very difficult trait to have. It comes with a lot of experience and being very open-minded. And it takes a lot of compassion, a lot of kindness. Again, in Sri Lanka, leadership, if you ask what a good leader is, you always think of someone stoic, somebody with their hand up, yelling, arguing, making it a point, really having a profile out there, lots of pictures, lots of stories. That's not leadership. That's not good leadership, right? So that's what you got to realize, is to understand your audience, understand where they're coming from, their fears, their challenges, and really be there for them. And one thing you can do to, get to understand empathy and work with your teams, because you won't not only have the teams that you're working with IEEE, but the teams that you're supporting as part of the startups, right? So you need to learn to adapt your leadership skills. And this comes through observation, right? And what that happens is, so I'll give you an example. When I was a team leader once, I had somebody who had Asperger's syndrome. So Asperger's is that they don't have very good social skills. So they don't make eye contact with you. They can't have a basic conversation with you. They look away, but they are technically brilliant, right? So if I use the same model that I used to assess the rest of my team, to assess this person for their performance reviews or even giving feedback, they'd fail miserably, right? So I had to focus on what was good about this person, the strengths they brought to the table, right? Which is the technical skills. It was not fair on that person for me to assess them based on their social skills, right? On their ability to network and things like that. And that's what good leaders do, right? You observe, and you bring that on board to how you do your tasks. And so one thing I realized is this person is not very good at team meetings, because I am like I drive my team hard. You have to share your stories, how you're going, how you're doing, what you've learned, what you've not done well. So you need to be able to talk a lot. Obviously, this person wouldn't. So then what I would do is I would get people to send me, I would send out an email summary, and then this person would respond in really detailed format, right? About what they're up to, what they're doing, etc. So I had to adapt, right? So this applies to when you're communicating with teams as well. Some people may be super great at communicating with you through WhatsApp. Some may be great over Slack. So this is where you need to adapt your skills. But this doesn't mean you're giving a free pass to people when they're not delivering the goods. You have every right as a leader to call people up when you have been very clear with them in terms of what their deliverables are. And when they don't come through, you have every right to keep them accountable. Be an active listener. So this is not something we do very well in Sri Lanka, because something I notice is we get very emotional about our problems, right? And sometimes we don't listen. What that means is some feedback that maybe you won't find very comforting. It may be negative feedback about yourself, right? And what that does is you automatically want to defend yourself, right? And you automatically want to rebut, and you want to stop that person and justify where you are coming from, right? Don't do that. Let them share what they want to, because sometimes, we always think you always have to come up with a solution for this. You have always come up with a solution to a problem. You'll be surprised at how much engagement you can actually build just letting people talk about their problems, their challenges. You know why? Because they just want to feel heard, right? So it's giving them that platform to speak out, and you just hearing them out for that 5-minute rant or whatever you want to do. And that's something I've always found as a leader. They're not coming to you always for a solution. They just want to let that frustration out and somebody to hear you out. Because the more they build that frustration, you're going to get a very angry group of people towards the end of the day who don't feel heard. Right? So remember that. That's one of the key takeaways from my life experiences. Be transparent. What's your vision? What's your goal? What are your timelines? When do you want people to deliver by when? Right? And this encourages a lot of engagement and builds a lot of trust. Being also transparent means owning up when you stuff up, right? And also owning up when somebody else in your team stuffs up. Because I always hear that, somebody else is given credit for my work, or I didn't get enough credit for my work. Well, welcome to being a manager and a leader, right? Sometimes you don't get all the credit. And when things go wrong, that's on you, right? And when things go right, give credit where it's due. If somebody came up with a brilliant idea or they went out of their way, call those people out, share those stories, have that level of transparencies, because that encourages people to be authentic and truthful. Because you know what happens when you are not transparent? People are going to start lying to you because you know you're going to lose your shit, right? Or you're going to like come up with a barrage of words at them. So they're going to lie to you to buy time off you. You don't want that as a leader. You want people to own up to their mistakes and really say, okay, I need help here. Like right now, I stuffed up, right? So set those values at the start of your program, right? Because sometimes people think it's assumed. Never assume that. Call this out and say, මොකක් හරි ප්‍රශ්නයක් වුණොත් මොකක් හරි වැරද්දක් වුණොත් මට ඇවිල්ලා කියන්න. කිසිම ප්‍රශ්නයක් නෑ අපි එක එකට විසඳන්න, right? That's what people want to hear as leaders. Okay, and also provide clarity. Again, a very typical Sri Lankan mentality is, you know, I figured this out back in the day when I had this problem, they'll do it too. Like, don't worry, right? Don't assume that. People come from different backgrounds, different levels of education, different levels of, you know, society that may not have had the same levels of privileges that you. And you are where you are today because you've stuffed up along the way and you've learned your lesson. So pass those lessons on. So, you know, like with what Sachindra and ICTA are trying to build that funnel, right? Pass those teachings on. So the next lot and the next lot and the next lot iterate faster. They're far much more agile than you, and you get to solutions so much more faster. So if you're, you know, launching a brand new system or a brand new process, don't say, here's the process. Explain it through, talk it through once with the team. Do you have any questions? Do you have any feedback? Get somebody else to feed the process back to you. Ask them, okay, how do you interpret this, right? So break it down to different ways and get feedback. And, you know, if you have to go step by step to explain something, that's not because they're stupid. That's because you're a good manager. And you're doing what I think we've all been in situations where we've done internships or roles, or things have been thrown at us to figure out. And, you know, sometimes managers don't have the time in the world, but there's a certain level of important information that needs to be disseminated. Always think, okay, how would I like to be treated in this situation? And treat your team accordingly. Feedback. Always remember, if you get feedback about a certain process, implement it where you can, right? So the team may come and say, okay, we're getting lots of questions on this thing, right? So what you can do is, okay, how do we implement this? Because lots of people are asking this question, what's the best tool? How do we get it out there fast, right? So one thing is not having too much of a hierarchy. So this is what we do at Hatch. We don't take a lot of permission to do stuff. We just do, right? And by that, what I mean is, say you have feedback about something not working or information not being available enough to the teams out there. Start a Notion board, share the link, get it out there. Ask anyone to go and update that Notion board with questions they've been having and the answers you give, right? And get it out there. And then iterate and iterate and iterate and iterate based on the feedback that you get. Because if you sit there waiting to create this, like, you know, amazing output and amazing whatever, you'll be waiting years, my friends, right? So get in there and do it if you think that's the right solution and you have enough and more people asking for it, okay? And also as a leader, which you will be at INSL, choose a time when you want to give feedback. Like I said, you don't want to be yelling at people all the wrong that they're doing. They may be having a hard day. They may be there just having one meal a day, right? That you don't know their circumstances. Like I said, always put in that empathy hat, right? And pick the right time when to give feedback. It could be a private, you know, you're taking them away and explaining, okay, this didn't go accordingly. This is what you should have done, etc. And vice versa, when you're receiving feedback as well, be open to it, right? Is what I got to share. And again, us as Sri Lankans are very famous for very long meetings. You don't need long meetings to be effective. Something we do at Hatch are scrums and huddles, right? So these are our meetings last maximum for 20 minutes, right? These are straightforward updates. You don't need to go into hell of a lot of details. To the point, go in there, share, you know, your team coming together going, okay, we're going to do X, Y, Z today. And somebody goes, oh yeah, do you know that this person is coming in at that time? That's going to impact that. How are you going to work that out? Okay, I'll help you out there, right? That's what good scrums and huddles. It doesn't have to be technical and, you know, all that stuff. It's about getting, okay, understanding what do you have to do, what's your blockages, what can we do to go above and beyond them, how do we get to where we need to get to, right? So lead those huddles, lead those scrums. Don't wait for somebody above you to wait to initiate these things. You know, that proactivity is very important for you being leaders in these circumstances and beyond as well for Sri Lanka, because the lessons that you learn from this program and beyond is really going to help you become amazing leaders. Good, kind, passionate leaders is what I'm really hoping that IEEE, along with INSL and all the amazing initiatives you'll be doing along the way. So that's me. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Ms. Minuri. That was a very interesting speech with a lot of interesting facts regarding the leadership skills, being an active listener, being transparent, and many more. Thank you once again for joining with us with a short notice amidst your busy schedule.
No problem, my pleasure.
And now I would like to invite Ms. Minuri to accept our token of appreciation for supporting us and being with us here today.
That's lovely. Thank you so very much. I hope my video is working for like 2 seconds. If I can switch it on. There we go. Thank you very much, everyone. Take care. Bye.
Bye. Next, I would like to invite Mr. Aloka Gunasekara to give some valuable tips to our INSL volunteers on how to motivate entrepreneurs and the audience. Over to you, Mr. Aloka.
All right, thank you very much. Before I start, can I have some reactions from you guys? I just need you guys to do some sort of reaction so that I see that you are here. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, okay. Right, so let me share my screen. All participants, share screen, yes. Yeah. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, okay. Wait. Right. So what I'm going to talk about is something quite interesting, keeping ourselves motivated, or in your case, how do you keep the people that you are going to be working with motivated through this whole, you know, the madness that's happening at this point. So it's quite poetic, the title I've used here, Reframing Mindset, the subtitle, in entrepreneurship beyond candlelight dinners and fuel kills. I actually don't have power at this point. So it's going to be important for you guys to be able to see through all the challenges that all of us are going through right now, and be able to motivate people, especially the people that you're going to be working with, as well as yourselves through all of this that's happening right now. So reframing mindsets. Why do we need to reframe our mindsets, especially right now? So yes, Sri Lanka is going through quite a lot of political turmoil, economic turmoil, and quite a lot of other things right now. And the deal is that we are going through all of these things, and we are looking at what's happening, and we are like, okay, when is this going to end? So this is the obvious question. And in a context like this, how do you keep yourselves motivated? And I'm sure most of you guys have gone through the fuel queues or the gas queues or some sort of a queue during the last few months. But one thing that you have to keep in mind is that this dire economic situation is not only limited to Sri Lanka, it's actually something that you can find pretty much across the world. So why do we have to look at the global situation while we are going through this situation in Sri Lanka? Now, the deal is what we are doing today is going to determine what our results are going to be tomorrow. Let me bring you some historical examples. Now, end of the World War II, that's when one of the biggest economic growth spurs happened. So this is when the USA started building all these like rockets. That's when we managed to land a man on the moon. Then of course we have all these SR-71s, those high altitude spy planes and stuff like that came about right after the World War II, just because the people were really eager to get things moving as quickly as possible. And generally people were like, so during World War II, everybody was like really dejected. There was so much of negativity in the world, but people really wanted to move out of that really, really fast. And historically, this has been true. If you take the dot-com bubble, that's when the Amazons of the world started. That's when the Googles of the world started. These end up being the trillion-dollar companies or billion-dollar companies, so on and so forth. And then in 2008, the US property bubble burst. And that's when we had things like Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, and so many other companies coming up. And let's look at the Sri Lankan situation. In 2009, the war ended. And all of a sudden, in Sri Lanka, we started seeing the biggest economic growth spur that happened in the country. I'm not going to talk about in detail about what happened in that. Some of it was good, some of it not that great. So I'm going to leave it at that. Now, let me connect back why this whole thing matters, why we really have to have this holistic view of what we are going to do. Now, according to the National Policy Framework for SME Development, more than 75% of the Sri Lankan businesses are MSMEs. MSME stands for medium to small, medium, sorry, micro to small, medium on enterprises. So right now, there's a massive need for strong entrepreneurship development focus. Why do I say that? You see, the current economic composition, if you look at it, we have a massive government service. And altogether, we are looking at something like 1.2 million people in the government service. And the problem is pretty much the rest of the working population or the rest of the workforce are essentially earning money so that they can not only manage themselves, but also manage a 1.2 million government service. Now we have a massive problem there. Now, obviously the government has to do something about this massive government service. And that's a policy decision that they have to make. But what happens is, if they do go ahead and do something about the government service, or take some action to limit the number of people in the government service, you have quite a lot of young people who would be looking for jobs. And this is where MSME development comes into play. And obviously, IEEE is in a really good position to understand these factors and figure out ways that we can create micro, small to medium to large scale enterprises. Now, I'm deliberately not talking about startups here, because startups happen to be a subsector of the MSMEs. So whatever the business that can be started, and if IEEE, Innovation Nation, if you guys can help it, I think you should do it. Now, let me go to a little bit of a social issue. Now, 𝐲𝐻𝐸𝐻𝐵, I'm sure you guys have heard this like multiple times during the last few days, but You see the 𝐲𝐻𝐻𝐵H during the last few months and 𝐲𝐻𝐻𝐵H that we've heard during the last, say, 20 years, there's a distinct difference. 𝐲𝐻𝐻𝐵H during the last 20 years is what brought us here. It's the reason why we are here today. So one of the problems aligned with that is almost always aligned with an 𝗓𝗏𝗏 attitude. You would come to some sort of a rally and say 𝗲𝐻𝐻𝐵H, and then your 𝗓𝗏𝗏 for that day is sorted. And then that sort of 𝗓𝗏𝗏 attitude has seeped into pretty much everything that we have done so far. It can be how someone does a job. It can be how we run a business. It can be how we solve a problem. It can be how we come up with a solution for a policy level issue, things like that. And this 𝗓𝗏𝗏 attitude has almost always hampered us. Now, it's really important that we take a step back, understand what's going on, and then decouple ourselves from this 𝗲𝗏𝗏 attitude. And I think IEEE is in a really good position to make sure that this happens. And how do you do that? So before we figure out, okay, how do we do that? Let me ask you some questions. Now, one of the questions that I have at this point is, are we myopic? I mean, are we looking at something that's not possible? Are we too late? The problems that we are facing today are problems that did not happen overnight. It has a historical background to it. In certain instances, going back to the early 50s. And is there light at the end of the tunnel? I mean, where do we see these things end? And the most important question here is, how can IEEE Innovation Nation help find answers for these? Now, I'm going to park these questions here because these are the sort of questions that we need to find answers for. And these answers are going to be how we motivate ourselves. That's the most important one. We have to motivate ourselves. Then we have to motivate the entrepreneurs that we are going to work with. And then, of course, we have to motivate the audiences that we are going to be working with. Now, let me put together some facts here. And I'm sure some of you guys are aware of the Colombo Stock Exchange. I'm sure some of you would know a lot more than this Colombo Stock Exchange than I do. I don't invest in the Colombo Exchange. I don't look at it as a good investment opportunity just because there's no logic behind it. But I digress. Let me just take you guys through the Sri Lanka's Standard & Poor 20. So it's essentially a list of 20 different industry verticals. And they have, I think, 295 companies in the Sri Lanka S&P 20 list, categorized according to the 20 industry verticals that I mentioned. And this is a snapshot of 20 companies out of those 295 who are trading really well about 2 months back. Right now, I think Lanka IOC is trading really well just because of the efficiency that they have. Anyway, now the deal is, if you look at the companies highlighted in blue, all these companies are service companies. So out of the Standard & Poor 20 list, out of that, only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 companies are product related companies. 12 companies are, or 60% of the top S&P 20 list are service oriented companies. So this is a problem. Why is this a problem? Because to manage a service company, you need to have a really good local economy going on. But right now, that's the one thing that we don't have. Pretty much everyone is going through economic hardships. And when that's the case, whatever the customers that all these companies, the 60% of the Sri Lankan standard poor top 20 companies service, they are going to have a problem. And if the customers of these companies are going to have the problem, then of course these companies are going to have a problem. So it's really, really important that we move away from a service mindset to a production mindset. And I think IEEE and IEEE Innovation Nation is in a really good wicket here to make sure that this mind shift happens. Because you guys represent the tinkerers, the builders, the innovators, the makers of the country. And if you can let people think differently, if you can inspire people to build stuff, if you can inspire people to innovate, if you can inspire people to create businesses that make sense, I think you guys would actually achieve a lot. And the deal is, the game field is changing. Now, let me ask you guys a question. How many of you have seen Stranger Things? How many of you have seen Stranger Things? All right, okay. Okay, so honestly, I love Stranger Things because to me, it's a sort of a personification of what's happening in Sri Lanka. So it's a bunch of young people who literally show their middle finger to a bunch of old people who don't know nothing much about what's happening, and they're just doing their thing, and they're just making things happen. They don't know everything, but one of the best things is when they don't know, they raise their hand up and say, "Hey, look, I don't know." Right? But at the same time, they come together as people, come together as a team, come together as a group, come together as friends, and then they solve problems that the adults, so to speak, adults can't figure out. And I think that's beautiful, and that's the sort of inspiration that we need. I mean, take what's been happening during the last couple of months. Is the young people who got together, raised their hands, raised their voice, and started talking about problems that we are having. And guess what? In a very, very short period of time, we actually managed to get a lot of things done. And that's inspiring. And that inspiration should flow with everything that we do, because the status quo that brought us here to where Sri Lanka is at, where the world is at right now, is not going to be the way forward for whatever the challenges that we are going to face in the future. We have so many things that we have to focus on and we have to solve. Climate change is very real. Pollution is very real. Then food security is very real. Then the income disparity between the haves and the have-nots is very real. The problems that the base of the pyramid is facing is very real. And how do we solve these problems? It's not the same sort of mindset that brought us here that's going to solve those problems. We definitely need to have a different mindset to solve all these problems and move forward. And I think as young people, as IEEE Innovation Nation, I think you guys are in a really good place, especially as people who have the capacity to inspire other young people as well. So I asked some questions. Okay, are we myopic? Are we too late? Is there a light at the end of the tunnel? So let's try to figure out some answers for these things. Now, first up, right now, entrepreneurship assistance is far more important than investment. Why am I telling you this? Now, right now, if you put a fixed deposit, you are essentially getting paid something like 27 to about 30% for rupee for every year. So not everybody is going to be interested in investments. So it's really important that we focus on entrepreneurship assistance. Now, as IEEE Innovation Nation, I think you guys are in a really good place to seek to help people, especially in the early days, because early days are the most difficult. You don't know what you're doing and you don't know how to seek help. I know, I've been there. When I started my own business, I didn't know like what I was doing. And I also did not know like whom to ask help from. And when you guys are the people who are helping those entrepreneurs, you are in a really good place to figure out what their problems are and then help them to find solutions. Or at least if you don't know the solutions, at least connect them with the right people to help them find those solutions. Investment is important, but it's not the most defining factor in a business. So that's something that you have to keep in mind, right? If you can connect people, if you can understand what somebody is going through, the problems that somebody is having, and if you can connect that person with a good mentor, then I think you've done your job at an exceptional level. The other thing that you guys can do is bring people together. There's absolute power in unity. It can be on anything. It can be on empowering people, or it can be helping people. So if, say, 3 or 4 different people are having the same issues on financial management, bring them together, find them a mentor, and help them to sort that problem out. Or if you find that, okay, 5 or 6 different people are trying to export something, different things, but they don't know how to do it, talk to EDB, talk to some people who are doing some commission problems, and these things can be done. And also, it's okay to say, I don't know. We don't know everything. And the deal is, I think we are taught in such a way that whenever you sit down to, or like whenever you sit down to test your knowledge, and if you say, I don't know, you are not going to get marks. That's something to do with the education system, but the real life is very different to that. If you say I don't know, that actually allows you to go and research and learn something or seek help from someone. It's absolutely all right to say, I don't know. And when you are in a position where you are helping people, be okay to say, I don't know. Be okay to say, okay, I don't know the answer to this, but let me seek help from someone else so that I will know the answer, and I'll connect you with someone that can give you the answer. I learn it, and I'll give you the answer. Things like that. There's absolutely no shame in saying, I don't know. Now, the next one, you have to stay as positive, but not toxically positive. Now, what do I mean by that? So, is whatever that's happening in the country good? Absolutely not. But what can we do instead of just loping? What can we do, like, instead of trying to be negative about it? The things that we can do is we can actually come together as people, figure out like, okay, what works, what doesn't, and focus on the things that work, so that the solutions that we can come up with would actually not only help us, it will actually help others as well. The last one, how entrepreneurship assistance is important than investment right now, is always have a bias for action. If you are in a position to do something, always choose to do something. Now, the deal about having this bias for action is, you do something, there's no guarantee that, okay, you are going to be 100% correct all the time, but you might do something right. Or the worst that can happen is, okay, you might actually do something wrong. And what happens then is you'll actually have a result that you would know what to do with. So this is one answer to the questions I asked. Are we myopic? Are we too late? Is there light at the end of the tunnel? Now, the second answer that we can focus on is that failure is inevitable. Now, IEEE Innovation Nation did not come to this place overnight. There's so much of trial and error over the years. There's so much things that you guys tried out. Some worked, some did not. And I'm thankful that, okay, I was in a vantage point to see the growth of IEEE Innovation Nation for the last so many years. So learning from that, one of the things that you can do is you can actually allow entrepreneurs to fail fast, fail cheap, and fail gracefully. Now, how do you do that? Now, one of the biggest issues about failure in startups is, again, something that indoctrinated in us just because of education. We come through education system that failure is not encouraged. If you fail, you are not going to get to, say, okay, grade 5 examination. If you fail, that's going to be bad. So in certain instances, if you don't get the right marks, that also means that, okay, you are not going to get into that good school that you always wanted to. O levels, if you don't get the right results, you might not be able to do physical sciences or biosciences or whatever. If you don't pass your A levels well enough, that means you're not going to get into a university, things like that. So failure is never encouraged. And when that's the context where failure is looked at, the moment you say, hey, look, okay, allow entrepreneurs to fail fast, fail cheap, and fail gracefully, that's like a massive oxymoron. Like, people don't understand it. So how do you help these people, okay, that failing is okay? See, the deal is, not a single entrepreneur that I know of have become successful in their first go. No, that was never the case. They always kept trying. And the most successful ones pretty much have the most number of failures as well. So the one thing that they have learned out of this whole journey of being an entrepreneur is that they always fail fast. The first few times they don't know how to fail fast. You're like, okay, yeah, this is an idea that I should be working on. So let me just keep doing it. And then it doesn't work. And then of course you also get like very bad information. There's so much of bias towards giving people positive reinforcement when there's no need for that. For example, if you're working on something, and if you go to 10 of your friends and say, okay, Machang, I'm working on this idea, what do you think? Invariably, you will get about 9 out of those 10 people telling, that's a really cool idea, you should be working on it. I think that's something that would work. And then there's this one person who would come at you and tell you, okay, this is a stupid idea, that's not going to work. The problem there is, since we are always, as people, we are always looking for positive reinforcement, we will always look at the 9 people who agree with us and think that, okay, that's the feedback that we should be looking at. And then we'll start working on our ideas based on those. Whereas we would disregard that one person who would talk to us negatively about whatever that idea. But the problem is, you develop this idea into a product and then you want to sell it. You go back to the same 9 people who earlier told you that, okay, it's a great idea. And they'll be like, okay, Machang, sorry, I don't need this right now, or I don't have money right now, so on and so forth. So it's called the agreement bias. So one of the biggest things that you have to do is allow entrepreneurs to fail fast, fail cheap, and fail gracefully. And whoever the entrepreneurs that you are going to be working with, and if you find yourself agreeing with them as a knee-jerk reaction, always check yourself. Always like ask questions. Don't make that commitment saying that, okay, it's a good idea. Ask questions, okay, what are they trying to do with it? What's the problem that they're trying to solve? And what's in it for the customer if they keep working on that product, so on and so forth. Ask those hard questions. it's really important that you ask those hard questions, because the earlier they understand that, okay, it's probably an idea that needs to pivot, or probably an idea that needs to be canned, the better position, they're going to be in a really good position. So help them to fail fast, fail cheap, and also fail gracefully. And what do I mean by that? So this relates back to the one thing that I mentioned earlier about our education and how this whole thing works. Now, what happens is, if you fail an exam, unfortunately, I have the bitter experience of failing multiple exams. Everybody looks at you as if, okay, so you are an outcast. So nobody asks you the reasons why you failed those exams. Now, when it comes to entrepreneurship, it's completely different. If you figure out that, okay, it's not working, that means it's a good opportunity for that entrepreneur or the potential entrepreneur to figure out something else. So one of the biggest responsibilities of you guys as the organizing committee of IEEE Innovation Nation is, when people figure out that their ideas don't work, help them to fail gracefully. It could be as like helping them to pivot that idea, or if it fails completely, maybe even help them to join another team and learn with that team, things like that. And that's going to be very important. Number two is normalize failure and let people get back up. So don't think of it as the polar opposite of toxic positivity. No, it's not. Now, what I mean by normalizing failure is, if you can help people understand that, okay, failure is a important part of an entrepreneurial journey, then people are going to be okay with it. They'll be like, okay, so I couldn't make this happen this time, but I'm going to do something better next time. So most often than not, the people that I have seen fail actually come back quite strong. Let me give you an example. So as Sachindra mentioned, we conducted Startup Weekend Candy back in, I think, 2018. We spent quite a lot of money by ourselves, but there was absolutely no good startup that came out of it. But we knew that the investment that we made is a good investment. So fast forward 4 years, what's happening right now is some of those people who attended Startup Weekend Candy are now in really good places. They never started their business right away. No, that did not happen. They actually took time. They tried few things, and we helped them to figure out certain things with those ideas. Some of those ideas failed. Like in almost all cases, their first few ideas failed. But when they started working on new ideas based on new insights, the third or the fourth idea that they worked on, that actually became successful. Some of these guys are not even in Sri Lanka right now. Some of them outside of the country, they are working on their startups. And I'm really happy that these guys made that commitment. So normalize failure, especially at IEEE Innovation Nation. And then most often than not, these guys often come back stronger. But at the same time, empower people to solve their problems on their own. What do I mean by that? You see, often we have a better vantage point about problems and solutions, because we are not focused on solving one problem. We have a better worldview than the people that we support. So, but then again, like, help them to figure out their solutions on their own. What then you do is you actually get them to go through that path of solving those problems and learning out of that journey that they have taken. It's really important. You just guide them. And when there's a need, you just nudge them in the right direction. But always allow them to solve their problems on their own. And related to that, allow them to find their own paths, but give them the tools where necessary. And these tools can be, connection with a mentor, introduction of, say, a new tool, or sending them a link to a video or an article that you've seen, things like that. It doesn't have to be like a massive thing. No, it can be as simple as checking on them on WhatsApp. So do these things and allow them to find their own paths. And the next one, this is perhaps the most important thing that you have to have. You have to have strong opinions, but keep them very weakly, or hold them very weakly. Because if becoming an entrepreneur is easy, everybody would be one. And also, we make our decisions based on the information that we have at that point. So we might have some information, we might actually make a decision based on that information, but guess what? 2 days later, we will have better information. And then if you are, hell bent on sticking to our decision, that's not going to help. You need to have this mindset of changing your mind whenever you have new information available. And next, I'm going to give you a little bit of a flavor of the sort of work that you guys are going to do. So this is the entrepreneurship growth stage. Let me just put it into a slide now that I have power. Okay, so what you are working on is essentially this awareness, inquisitiveness, and to a certain extent, these business assistance areas. So what you're doing right now is you're creating entrepreneurial awareness, and then of course you are creating this inquisitiveness, which is really important, so that you get people to be interested in entrepreneurship. And of course you ask the right questions, so they are like, is that an idea that I should work? Is this something that I can build with, let's say, 2 or 3 other people? And how do we find our market? How do we find our beachhead? Who are the people that we should talk to? These are the sort of things that you guys will be doing. And to a certain extent even business assistance, because if you can connect them with the right mentors, you are also doing this business assistance part as well. And through the workshop that you will be doing, you'll be doing some capacity building. So all these are really important aspects of growing entrepreneurship and startups. So there are so many organizations who are actually coming together in this. I've just listed them down. So you can actually reach out to some of these organizations when you have that need to help the people that you're working with. So how do we do this? Now, I talked about all the solutions that we can actually put together, so on and so forth, but what's the way forward? So the way forward is collaborate freely and constructively. And how you do that is you basically talk to everyone, figure out like, okay, what you're doing and how what you're doing is going to be aligned with whatever the other stuff that the other people are doing. And then you help them to find ways of working together. And of course, it has to be constructive, because the one thing that you have to understand is the work that you do is actually much bigger than you and I. So IEEE Innovation Nation, I mean, yes, what you guys are doing is extremely important. And if there's a way for you guys to work with other organizations, you should definitely do it. Because the work that we do doesn't only affect IEEE Innovation Nation, no, it affects a lot more other people. And if there's a way for us to figure out, okay, how can we get all these people to create a cohesive whole, I think that's the most important. The second one is always seek a result. Now, what do I mean by that? Now, like I mentioned earlier, if you have a bias for action, you'll always get somewhere. Then the worst that can happen is a negative result. Like you try something out, something completely opposite to what you expected would happen. But guess what? Now you have a learning experience. And what you can do is you can actually freely share that or openly share that experience, saying, guys, look, here's what we tried. This did not work. So if you want to try this again, be careful. And that's a good outcome. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. So always, always seek a result. And since IEEE Innovation Nation, I mean, you guys have a massive history of doing things, having that collaboration between different batches, so on and so forth. I think this would work beautifully with you guys. You always seek a result. If it works, you just tell the next batch of people who are going to take over the program, saying, hey, look, okay, this is what we tried, this is what worked. And if something doesn't work, you basically convey the same message. Guys, this is what we tried, did not work, maybe because of these reasons. So if you want to try this again, just be careful not to try the same things, so on and so forth. And now, since you have a committee, just one person do one thing and do that one thing really, really well. Because if you have a bunch of people who are doing this, the collective result of that doing one thing right is going to be much, much more than doing a lot of things haphazardly by quite a lot of people. No. So do one thing right and make sure that that one thing is going to help a cohesive whole. And focus on other things where that one thing that you guys are doing becomes muscle memory. So this applies to what you guys do as a committee, but it actually applies to the startups as well. And the last thing, entrepreneurship development and what you guys do as IEEE Innovation Nation. The outcome of that is much bigger than you and I. So keep that in mind and keep that very firmly in your minds. The work that you do is really important, it's needed, and you are actually shaping the way that how Sri Lanka is going to work in the future. So you are doing important work. Always keep that in mind. So guys, with that, I would like to conclude my presentation. Thank you very much. If you have questions, do ask.
Thank you, Mr. Aloka. That is a very insightful and timely speech in which I personally got to know a lot. I hope all our volunteers have gained the best out of this session too. And now I would like to invite Mr. Aloka Gunasekara to accept our token of appreciation for supporting us and being with us here today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. As we have come to an end of this fruitful and interesting session, once again, I would like to thank Mr. Sachindra, Ms. Minuri, and Mr. Aloka for accepting our invitations and for enlightening our INSL volunteers with some very important aspects. Thank you once again. Next, I would like to invite 𝗜𝗡𝗦𝗍𝐿𝐴, Vice Chairperson of Innovation Nation Sri Lanka, to deliver the vote of thanks. Over to you, 𝗜𝗡𝗦.
Thank you, Pavani. Good evening, everyone. I, on behalf, extend a very hearty vote of thanks to the guest speakers for gracing your important word and sharing with us your experiences today. And I must mention our deep sense of appreciation for Mr. Sachindra Samararatne, Ecosystem Builder, Industry Development, Startup and Innovation at ICTA, and Ms. Minuri Adasooriya, Head of Programs at Hatchworks, Mr. Aloka Gunasekara, the Director, Startup and Business Ecosystem Innovation at YouLead, for giving excellent coverage to the training session. Also, all the representatives from ICTA, Hatch, and YouLead, thank you very much for taking your valuable time to join the session. And also, I may like to express our sincere thanks to Mr. 𝗓𝗚𝗏𝗏𝗏, Chairperson of IEEE Young Professionals Sri Lanka, and all the representatives of IEEE Young Professionals Sri Lanka for your presence gracing this occasion. Also, my sincere gratitude goes to UNDP for all the effort in the program. I extend my thanks to the Innovation Nation Sri Lanka Organizing Committee for their enormous cooperation in the organization of this event. Also, the provincial coordinators and university representatives and the members of newly appointed regional organizing committees, thank you very much for your enthusiasm in joining and obtaining the maximum out of this session. Once again, I want to state that we are all most grateful to all of you for being with us this evening. Stay tuned with us for the next extension of this program. I bid you all good night and stay safe.
Thank you, Viniaki. Okay, so now since we have come to an end of this session, I would like to tell all of you to keep smiling, keep learning, and be blessed. Keep hoping for the best even in hard times. Thank you so much for being such a wonderful audience. Thank you. I'm 𝗬𝗓𝗏𝗂𝐵 signing off.